Alright, I admit it. There's still technically more I need to do in order to truly say that I've completed the Hunting Rifle only challenge. There's still the DLC that I had forgotten to do, and I got called out for it. So without further ado, let's finish this. Now, the overworld in the DLC is actually quite interesting. They changed a lot of stuff. For the most part, they just made it more difficult. There are way more elites, and the areas are massively bigger. But other than that, there's still not that much to talk about. We make our way through the area and quickly make it to Ward Prime. And this is where I get annoyed. Ward Prime is just one giant puzzle, and it's honestly quite tedious to do several times over, especially when you've already played it multiple times. Basically, you just touch this shadow orb, and then you gotta go around clearing all these growths that are blocking your way in order to power up the station so you can make it to the actual planet where you're supposed to get to. Along the way, these creatures that are only seen when you're in the second dimension get in your way. One of them is completely immortal, and the other one are these flying creatures that are just so fun to fight, and are not annoying in any way, shape, or form. Now, this entire area isn't too difficult. Unfortunately, the hunting rifle sucks here, because the main goal isn't killing multiple enemies or fighting a boss, it's clearing these infestations. And it just takes way too long with the hunting rifle to clear these infestations. Especially in the reactor room where you have to clear 3 all at once without dying, otherwise you have to restart. It takes almost 20 shots with my current loadout, so that's gonna have to change. So after a couple attempts, we swap our gear, put as much damage on as possible, and start with the basic strategy of just doing the middle one first. Once we get that middle one done, we then go to the bottom one and use all of our power to get that bottom one done, since the bottom one is the most dangerous. After doing that, we then go up the top one, and by the point we've gotten up to the top, we should have been able to bait most of the dangers down to a lower level, so that way the top is the free one, as long as we do it fast enough. It's not clean, and it's also not really fun, because this was an annoying section where I died multiple times to enemies below or above me that I just couldn't keep track of. But we got it done in the end, moved past it. We clear all the growths, and successfully activate the reactor for Ward Prime, and we're able to move on. Now, other than that, there's not much to do in this area other than clean out the rest of the infestations. So we quickly find the fuse, turn on the power, open the blast door, clear the last infestation blocking our way to the next planet, and head there. And with that, we're finally done with this puzzle that probably took me a little bit longer than I would care to admit, but that doesn't matter. Now, this planet is honestly quite fun. As I said, I actually truly enjoy this DLC, and I think it does quite a lot of things correct in terms of improving upon Remnant's already core gameplay mechanics. However, it is very, very big, and compared to other planets, not only is it big, it's also very difficult. The trend of seeing elites more often, and those elites also being just generally more powerful, is going to continue. Especially with all the basic mob trash enemies just also being quite troublesome if you're not careful. And it's at this point where the hunting rifle is also starting to show that it's really just not... You've gotta really gotta work to make this thing do its job these days. But with enough firepower and enough bullets, we can get through anything as long as we don't get one shot. But regardless, we make our way through the overworld and successfully get into our first dungeon. Now, dungeons in Resium have also continued the trend of just being generally larger and more difficult than any of the previous planets. However, there is one key difference, being that other than huge crowds of enemies spawning, you don't really get swarmed nearly as much as you did in the other dungeons. It's a small thing, doesn't really make it that much easier. Those dungeons are so crazy hard, and it takes a lot of ammo to get through them, especially with some of the elites having a ton of armor on them. And no weak points to really take advantage of. But Other than that, dungeon's a dungeon, nothing interesting really happens, so we just skip to the boss. And our first boss is the Jackal. One thing to take note of is that each boss in this area tends to be fairly unique. For instance, the Jackal has a bunch of abilities, as they do. He's the basic behemoth guy. He has a charge attack, but after doing a certain amount of damage, he will run away and summon a bunch of minions. These minions will chase you down to distract you as he tries to throw things at you, along with the fact that if the boards on the ground get directly hit by either the rat's explosions or a boulder, it will cause a hole to appear and break it, causing more issues later in the fight. Now, this isn't too hard to deal with as long as you're careful with your positioning. Other than that, he has one more attack, and it's the Shockwave attack. This is his most difficult attack, in my opinion. If you're not ready for it, it will most likely kill you. However, it's fairly easy to dodge. You can either spot dodge it or roll forward, although be cautious rolling forward because that will most likely put you in melee range. But just make sure you're dodging those attacks and keeping minions and don't get distracted, and make sure you're positioning well. This boss is as a cakewalk. On our way to the next dungeon, we did come across this section right here. It's a little bit of a secret area. It's a bit of lore as well as some loot. There's also a secret weapon if you go through the bookshelf. This weapon isn't useful for us at all because it's a melee weapon, but for the course of this entire run I haven't picked up very much gear at all, other than rings and necklaces, so I pick it up because it's funny. On to our next boss. I don't know what to call these guys. The Rat and the Rider, basically. These guys are fairly unique. Honestly, most bosses in this DLC are going to be pretty unique, which is part of why it's so good. These are a duo, obviously the Rat and the Rider duo, that have several abilities. They can charge. After a certain point, their leader the rider will dismount and have his own slew of ranged attacks, ranging from meteors whenever he calls his rat back to just summoning a bombardment of arrows from the sky to kill you, all while his rat burrows underground and chases you. And to top it all off, whenever they do reconvene, they have this AoE attack that they do that if you're too close, will just kill you. So you have to be very careful to distance yourself properly. Not only that, if you kill one and the other is still alive, which actually, if I remember correctly, you can't kill them both at the same time. There's a thing in place to prevent that. When you kill one, the other becomes enraged, and their attacks become stronger. It's more difficult to dodge, just to keep the difficulty of the fight up even when one is down. Typically, I kill the rider, because I think the mount is easier to deal with than the rider, but that's just my personal opinion. This fight did take us a couple tries, but other than one little close encounter right there where he wanted to say hi to the camera, we take this down without too much of a problem. Fun fight though. With the Rat and the Rider out of the way, we make our way to a bit more story lore, the last frost giant, and then we move on to our next dungeon. It's just a tunnel of rats. It's all it is. Ninja rats, but rats nonetheless. Moving on. This dungeon wasn't too interesting other than the fact that it was pretty funny to just this little clip of me just having to run away the entire dungeon because I didn't have enough time to ammo box and I didn't have enough ammo to shoot them. And because of the rule in place of no melee allowed, I couldn't hit them. So I was just desperately trying my very best to get this ammo box off so I could get through the rest of this dungeon. I finally get just enough away and I get it, and then unfortunately I'm not paying attention and get hit. After that we get to the boss of this area, the ninja rat lord himself, Master Splinter. In reality he's just a normal rat. But this guy is quite obnoxious. He has quite a few attacks as well. But honestly, none of them are nearly as dangerous as just his homing knife attack, which really threw me off for quite a long time. After a while, he will also try and just rush you down. This isn't too difficult because the timings are pretty lenient. And then after a while of that, he will then fall back and cover himself with more knives to summon a bunch of his buddies. The most dangerous part is trying to make sure that you don't get greedy and get hit trying to chase him down, because that's an easy way of dying. And it's come to this point where I need to let you guys know that I have woefully neglected my armor. So I can't take many hits at all. Most things just one-shot me when it comes to bosses. I can't take a single hit. So this boss does take us a while. With his mobility and his constant summoning, it's very, very scary. But luckily for us, we once again managed to clutch it up at the very end with something I would even consider a sliver of health. But once that's done, we finally get to some more lore bits. We are nearing the end. We talk to some special girl who apparently ran away from home or something like that. I don't know the lore, it's not that important. And then we get sent to probably the weirdest sequence of events in Remnant. Remnant's a very odd game with a bunch of back and forth, but apparently we get to some kind of mindscape. But after that, we quickly escape that, and before we can actually get to the end of the game, since that was actually the final section, we do need to do one more dungeon since I accidentally skipped it. It's not that important, it's just a totem area, although I don't know if I did something wrong or what, but this area just would not stop summoning extra enemies and I couldn't make any progress. I don't know if I messed something up, if I triggered something or what, but this entire sequence is just me running and shooting these rats that just won't stop spawning. But after that, we get to the final boss, Harsgard. Now, Harsgard is probably one of my favorite bosses in Remnant. He's got a ton of different attacks. Very, very complex boss. Very, very interesting. And has multiple phases. Now, Harsgard has a bunch of crystals that surround him, and he can use these to launch attacks. They will either be 2 lasers that will rotate in a circle, a mortar attack, or he will just summon balls of death that will shoot at you and try and kill you. After reaching 50% health, he will switch to a melee stance, and in this stance he loses some attacks but also gains some new ones, a charge attack and some lunge attacks, as well as this ground pound that winds up being the bane of my existence. He does keep his mortar attack and his ball attack, however they're significantly weaker. And after that, we get on to the final phase, phase 3, where he becomes this colossal titan, and has a ton of extra abilities as well. All of his abilities get swapped out for more lasers with crystals. He can just choose sections of the map to just obliterate, and then he can just decide to glass a specific part of the map and you have to run away from that section until it disperses. Now, this boss did take me a couple attempts because I'm a little rusty, but once I learned how to dodge that slam attack, that gave me a lot of trouble. For some reason, I just kept dying to it. I kept rolling the wrong way or being at the wrong timing. We get to the final section, don't fall for any of his traps, finish him off, and watch him have an existential crisis. Once this little section is over with, we jump through a portal, and that's the DLC completed. With this, we can finally answer definitively, yes, you can beat Remnant from the ashes with only the hunting rifle, DLC included. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Adios, folks.